We've just come into the back garden now of Gail and David Bromley on Horsell, Birch. The house and garden belonged to the Jackman family originally and was part of some of the farm cottages along there where they used to trial out plants. So the garden has one or two quite interesting features that are a legacy from that time. The patio is quite large, which is rather nice to sit out on. It's around 50 square metres, and the rose that you see on the house, the white rose, is a kiffskate in full flower at the moment. It loves this time of early June. The red rose that's hanging over the corner of the kitchen area is one that we got for 50p from the Radio Times. So cheap and cheerful, but certainly very beautiful. Okay, now we're standing with our back to the house and looking down across the patio towards the bottom of the garden. It's quite interesting. The Jackmans made a series of reveals, and this is in fact a very long and narrow garden, but it looks as if it's foreshortened almost only as far as the tree that you see in the distance. However, as you go round corners, you find another little bit of the garden, so it makes it a little bit more interesting instead of being very long, narrow and flat. Well, the sun's come out now, which is rather nice. The Phlomis fruticosa on the left-hand side of the frame is glowing in the sunshine nicely, and we're going to walk around just to show you what the reveals are like. So as you come round a corner here, you can see we're in another little section of the garden. Here we have an akebia growing along the fence, which is an interesting plant in the Lazardibulariaceae, with little purple male and different female flowers, and a little clematis growing in a circular area where we have a lot of lily of the valley in the springtime. It smells absolutely wonderful. And then round another little corner, and when we do this we can see the very large bed that we have on the left hand side, which is pink and blue. So we have everything from campanulas to delphiniums to clematis, climbing, geraniums, everything that gives sort of shades of that pinks, blues, and the occasional white, with a pink beauty bush which currently is in flower as well. And then walking round the corner again, and you can see how these reveals work quite cleverly, because you never know that you're going to come across another little bit. We've got a little shady area here where we have plants that are very good in the winter time. A lot of hellebores, snowdrops, little wind flowers, pasque flowers and things of that sort. And this is a nice shady area for everybody too. And then we come around the corner yet again to what is the main kind of opened out area of the garden, passing by the potting shed and glasshouse on the left. In this long open area of the garden, one of our pride and joys is probably the pond. I used to run a garden design course at Kew with a gentleman called John Brooks for quite a number of years, and one of his students who came on the course was a gentleman called Cleve West, who now is quite a famous designer himself, a gold Chelsea winner. And he and I became good friends, and he came round for dinner one evening and said, "Oh, you want to have a pond, Gail?" And I went, "Okay." And then he literally designed it on the back of an envelope. So here's the pond as it stands now. Obviously full of aquatics, full of newts, full of wonderful dragonfly nymphs that later turn into dragonflies and buzz over the pond, lots of damselflies, frogs, etc. And of course surrounding the pond area we have quite a lot of marginals planted, so ferns, iris, the gunnera that you see, a very large plant, trollius and things of this sort. So it looks glorious both in the spring and in the summer, and is absolutely full of wildlife. One of the main features of this part of the garden is the tulip tree that you see in front of you. You might just be able to make out the sort of little yellowy shaded flowers on it that look a little bit like upright tulips sitting on the branches. Liriodendron, there are two species, one from China and one from America, is not particularly common in small gardens such as these, but obviously it was something planted by the Jackmans as a trial tree, which is why we've inherited it. This we think is around 50 years old, because they have to be at least 30 before they flower, and this has been flowering for a good 20 years now. So we'll have a little look at the flowers a little bit closer. So you can probably see the tulips now on the tree. The plant's very loosely related to magnolia, so it has a kind of magnolia look about it. But because the flowers are this yellow, orange, green shading, sometimes they're quite difficult to spot on the tree, and lots of people walk past it and don't even realise that it's in flower. I've just popped into the glasshouse here to show you the tomatoes. We used to grow our tomatoes on canes, but now we grow them suspended from strings. You can probably see the strings go right up, and they're attached to a wire that runs the length of the glasshouse. Canes are okay, but not quite so flexible to use. And the curator of Kew came to live with us for a while he was in between houses, and he taught us this trick whereby you suspend the string, tie it to the base of the tomato once you plant it, and then you can wind the string around the tomato as it grows, and that gives it wonderful support, and the thing will grow right the length of the string. So I just want to mention one or two plants that I find really interesting. This is Alchemilla mollis. It's quite common, and you see it in lots of gardens around Britain, but its name is quite intriguing. There's quite a nice history to it. In the morning, when you've had a cooler night, you get dew forming on the leaves, or sometimes it's expressed out of the leaves itself, and you get little water droplets that sit on top of these leaves. And alchemists in the Middle Ages thought that this was the purest water that you could possibly have, and so it was one of their ingredients that they used when trying to change base metals into gold, and hence its name, Alchemilla. I do love foxgloves. They're actually, the name comes from fox's glow. Not a glove for foxes, but a glow was a musical instrument that had bells on either side, tapering from large at the base to small at the top. So you can see that it exactly does resemble that. So this is foxglove. Great, of course, to produce digitalis, which is what we use to treat heart conditions nowadays. Another of my favourite plants is the gunnera, which looks rather like giant rhubarb, I suppose, although it's no relation. It has some very prickly stems, and the underside of the leaves has sort of prickles on it as well, so you have to be careful when pruning it down. And you do need to cover it up in the winter time because it's a little bit tender, so we cover ours over with straw once it's died down. And you can see on the right hand side one of the flower spikes, like a huge cone sort of drawing upwards. It does need to be near water, so you have to plant it at a pond edge usually. So I'm just going to leave you with a final shot of the non-flowering aspect of the garden. Right down at the bottom we've got our chickens, who are a firm favourite on garden safari days, particularly with the children who come. Although probably I have more questions about the chickens than I do about the plants from people who visit. So say goodbye, girls, and we'll say goodbye ourselves. Bye.